Hello everyone. Good to see the chat messages streaming in and getting a sense of being together here again for me on a Wednesday morning. Here in quite a sunny California here. So welcome everyone. So this week we've been practicing with this simile called crossing the flood. And the last couple of days in our meditation, we started with this metaphor of stepping into the flow of our lives, and kind of moments of our lives that forms of a flow. And then yesterday, we shared a little reflection about crossing. Crossing requires us to really be in the current, in the flow. And so we did not just stepping into the flow, but also staying in the flow. Now today, we're going to expand a little more in that process, which is to stabilize ourselves in the current, whether there may be waves, larger amount of water, or small streams. We're learning to stabilize ourselves. And so in this meditation, we'll continue with this water flowing metaphor by stepping into the flow of our moments and then staying there and learning to become stabilized in the flow. So let's meditate together. Maybe taking a few long, deep breaths, maybe 3 to be exact. Breathing in deeply. Breathing out fully. Again. And the 3rd time. And as you breathe out, settle into the space you're in, right here, right now. Stepping into the present moment. Stepping into sati, mindfulness. There is a felt sense of nowness. Now, this moment, it feels like this. At this moment, and this moment, I can begin to notice the shift and changes that happen in the body. A kind of a gathering of energy, settling of the energy. It's like the weight settles down. Mindfulness, sati, can become fuller, more expansive. You're more staying with the here rather than going to the objects in the mind. Resting in the mindfulness. Things come alive in the field of mindfulness. Maybe there is a felt sense of being available to the embodied sensations, movements in the mind. We are not in a hurry. We're learning to steady ourselves in the here and now. There is an energetic participation of the flow of life, moments. And we're not in a hurry. What's the felt sense for you, not being in a hurry? There may be ease in the body, relaxation in the heart. And the mind may be more soft. fully immersed in this moment. There can be aliveness. And so there is no complacency. Maybe even a hint of delight. To be unhurried. Steady. Stable. In the open presence. If there are any degrees of a wholesome feelings present, register it. The stability, steadiness is calming for the nerve systems. And maybe there is a slight uplift in the heart. The delight of walking the path. unhurrying, untarrying. Centered. There may be quiet joy here in the stability. And of course, in the steadiness, our mind can slip out into the past and future, narratives, stories. It's not a mistake. It's just what it is. When you notice it, right here, right now, there is a choice to come back to the present moment, mindful and aware, without the second arrow. Just now. Just now. You don't need to count how many times you come back to this moment. What matters is this moment. You come back to this moment. That's enough. in the steadiness and the stability of your presence. Might you meet life in a new way? What becomes available in this steadiness and the stability? Maybe the felt sense in the body expresses a kind of goodness, well-being, in the midst of non-well-being. Might that be a possibility for you, for us, and for the people we encounter? So in crossing the flood, there's a simile and that we've been unfolding. We spoke about the symbolic meanings of flood, greed, hatred, delusion, the forces, unwholesome forces that tend to overwhelm us. And we spoke about crossing, not so obvious, but the Buddha said, I crossed the flood. And so the deity who asked the question got really curious. And so the deity asked the Buddha, how did you do that? How did you cross the flood? Here is a rather cryptic answer. So the Buddha said, by not halting, not straining, I crossed the flood. Not halting, not straining, I crossed the flood. And there are often other words when teachers share their expressions of this. And in the meditation, I also used not tarrying, in this sense of freezing, and not hurrying, not get busy, engaging in overstimulation. Or sometimes teacher might also use not overexerting or under-efforting, not being complacent, but not being overly stimulated. I'm using all of those words to kind of point to that the Buddha is pointing to the common phenomenons when we're stepping into the water, stepping into the flow, what tend to happen. And inviting us a different way to go through this kind of choppy water, so to speak. At times, I remember being in choppy water, kind of swimming in the ocean once, and there was some moments that the waves got a little bigger, and I was not so far into the ocean. It was still close to the shore, but it was far enough And that when the waves came, I got panicky. I started kind of swim fearlessly, but very quickly, within seconds, I know I started exhausting myself. And I wasn't so close to the shore that if I kept on doing this, I will not make it to the shore. And so I had to slow down, to just be steady in my strokes, to move towards the shore. And so there's a sense of hurrying or straining. And we often have, we may often notice that we're in a hurrying culture. We're quite in a hurry. We're always in a rush often, and rushing from one appointment to another, one meeting to another, or one thing to another. I remember when I worked, and there was a time that I was running, literally running from one meeting to another. I would notice that I wouldn't have my whole foot on the ground before I kind of take the next step. So it's almost like a tipping my toe forward, a tipping my body forward to go, lean forward. And that's easy to fall, right? That's easy to fall. So in this practice, the Buddha said, we're not in a hurry, not hurrying. And we can be in a big hurry to want what we wanted. Maybe it's this outcome orientation, result orientation, and even in meditation, we can get kind of spiritual ambitions. If I'm not calm within the first 10 minutes, somehow I'm not doing it right. Or, I should be quitting, doing it all together. And so this kind of a striving, over efforting. And this actually hinders us. And it does not cultivate this kind of a capacity that the Buddha is pointing to. This capacity of being steady with our experience. And then there's a sense of not halting, not tarrying, that may manifest in many different ways for us. Halting, tarrying, sometimes it may manifest as a kind of complacency, lethargic. Not halting in going through the current, there is actually a kind of alive engagement. You feel energetic engagement with life. There is a kind of soft vigilance. But it's not freezing either. So if we're freezing in the current, and guess what? It won't help, right? It won't help crossing the flood. And there are many manifestations of this kind of a freezing also. Sometimes it can be a physical kind of froze. We froze because of anger in the body. It can also be psychological or emotional. That we can have a kind of sinking, stuck feeling. And we're not quite present for our experience. And maybe spacey, spaced out. And so these are the things that for us to begin to notice. What is the manifestations of this? What does it feel like to not halting, not hurrying? Another kind of a halting is when we're stuck in some kind of a fixations in our ideas and views. If we are identified or defined by our patterns of or the waves of emotions, fear or anger, or whatever others that might be here. And we can freeze ourselves into a kind of a belief, oh, this is who I am. We can't move beyond it. And all that we're relating to the experiences can now begin to through that lens of, this is who I am. I'm always agitated. I'm always anxious. So we can't see the possibilities of momentary freedom from anxiety. So this hurrying, tarrying have many manifestations, and so is the unhurried mind, untarried mind. So the Buddha uses rather specific words, but it's also pointing to a whole range and a whole territory. So they're not a fixed thing. They are very quite situational. And so an important step in practicing towards this orientation of non-hurrying, non-tarrying, is to learn to recognize the subjective experiences of this. The unhurried, untarried. How does it feel for me in this moment, in this situation? The Buddha didn't really say, you always walk at 5 miles per hour or, in the 65 degrees direction. No. This is something that is rather alive for us to feel into in the different situations that we're in. Because the current, the flow of our lives are ever shifting and changing. So what might be needed is quite different. In the meditation, sometimes, maybe on retreat or maybe on long retreat, there are a very few, or maybe there are smaller waves of wanting, not wanting, aversion. The flood streams are not so big. And this crossing the flood can feel effortless. It's this kind of effortless effort. Not much to do. We're more learning to be present just as it is, and that's enough. And other times, can be on retreat, can be in daily life, and there may be just streams of fantasies and very juicy stories that takes away from the present moment. And so what might be needed for us to learn is to have a skillful way to allow us to come back to the present moment. There may be a little uplift in us to be present more fully, to be more embodied, and again. And also, as best as we can, we're not pushing ourselves, demanding ourselves. And so that our effort is kind of in sync with a kind of some degrees of stability. We're not looking for perfect here. And sometimes when there are big eddies, big storms, what may be needed is to turn our attention away. Maybe we go walk in the nature, do some gardening, or talking to some friends to get support. The Buddha didn't say that you can't walk with other companions on the path. In fact, he said walk with other companions on the path. So why do we limit ourselves? Our ego mind sometimes can come up with certain ideas and then lock ourselves into those ideas. it can get grandiose or result-driven, demanding ourselves to go conquer the biggest waves in our lives right now. No, we're learning to cultivate a capacity. So the measure is not based on our ego's ambitions, but it's based on the sincerity of the practice, coming back here and now, not some kind of outcome in the future. And so our effort is in some kind of proportion to what's available in our capacity. So we start small, and we let ourselves be steady in the baby waves first, and then we grow from there. And then we learn from our experience. And so this is something that we will continue. And you see it in the sutta that the deity wasn't satisfied with this one-liner the Buddha offered. And so we will explore, and there is more that we can learn from our experience as well. So for today, as you go about the day, recognize the felt sense of hurrying, tarrying, and the absence of a hurrying and tarrying, and be attuned to what the effects is for you. How does it affect me in my heart and mind? And we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day.